What's going on, my people? Happy Sunday. This is Software Sundays hosted by Build, Learn, Impact. And in these episodes, we want to inform, educate, and start conversations about technology and the types of transformations that it has inside of our communities. So, if this is your first time, welcome here. It's good to have you. If you've been rocking with us for a while, thanks for coming back. And let's get started. Before we jump in, though, I do have a few announcements. Over the last week, if you have me on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, all of the other rest, I did take a bit of a hiatus. I'm still dealing with a little bit of medical issues. Not 100% yet, but we getting there. But I couldn't leave the family hanging for this episode, so I'm back. I may share a little bit of information throughout the week with snippets on socials, but we'll see how I feel. Other than that, happy birthday, Dara Barra. You are officially into the 30s club, right? Not shaming you, I'm just saying. But happy birthday to you. I hope your year and year past and year ahead is amazing. I hope you are feeling healthy, great, and youthful, whatever they say on your birth certificate and your ID. Um, Also, happy birthday, Day Day. Not exactly sure how old you are, but I hope you feel great in whatever level of development you are in already. Whatever that age may be, hope you're feeling healthy. I hope you're feeling uh lively and just all is well with you. So happy birthday to you. I think we're still inside of Aquarius season, so stay wavy, my people. And Rama, I'm about to mispronounce it, but Ramadan Mubarak to all my Muslim people, my brothers and sisters that are of the faith. I hope Allah accepts your fasting and your prayers during this time, and that y'all keep the strength within you to go through your fast and gain the clarity and education that you need and that you will gain over this next month. So good luck to you all, and no, see you, see you soon. Uh, so let's get started. Before we start, though, disclaimer, gotta say it. Software Sundays is for informational purposes only. The information we provide is not professional advice. The views expressed are my own or those of quoted individuals and do not represent the uh, entity Build, Learn, Impact or its affiliates. The topics discussed may or may not apply to your specific business situation. So consult your own legal, business, or tax advisors before making any decisions based upon information found in this show. Uh, yeah, so keep that in mind. And let's get into the news. So a few things that caught my interest this week were Alphabet, the parent company of Google, and YouTube and Waymo and so on. They have a lot of uh, entities under their umbrella. They issued a rare 100-year bond. Uh, that 100-year bond was a very small percentage of the 32 billion that they raised in about 24 hours this week, but it shows how much confidence they have and that investors have in them that they would even buy a 100-year bond from a private corporation. Just to kind of make you understand how big that is, most governments don't issue 100-year bonds. The US Treasury has never issued a 100-year treasury or a 100-year bond. So the fact that people expect this company to exist longer than certain countries would exist is pretty significant. It kind of demonstrates how important the infrastructure that these companies are building and the infrastructure that they already own is to society, and especially to the our development as we continue to build and get new technologies inside of the world. This is very interesting uh, because part of that uh, bond was, or the reason that they raised the 30 billion was that they're trying to, and they are currently building out data centers to power AI and the cloud. I won't even say the cloud. The cloud has already got built out as much as it needs to get built out for most workloads. And honestly, a lot of companies still haven't shifted into the cloud as much as they will in the future. But at this point, they're still building out data centers to help train and run AI workloads. And a lot of those have not come online either yet. So this build out I shared a few weeks ago is expected to cost $3 trillion by 2030. And a lot of the financing for that build out is going to come from debt. And yeah, it's I think Alphabet, Amazon, and all of the other hyperscalers have already spent about 600 billion in 2025 investing into the data centers, into the real estate, and into the construction, into the provisioning of those sites. So this is a fraction of that cost and a fraction of what they expect to spend in 2026 and beyond. But we're just getting started for what that rollout is really going to be. And I think it was a power play for Alphabet to just show how much confidence the market has in them, uh, that they would even be able to raise this amount of money, especially as quickly as they did. And they didn't even, uh, there wasn't enough supply for all of the demand for their bonds. So they may have issued 30 billion worth of bonds in different currencies. I think Swiss francs, US dollars, I think euros, and even some bonds in silver. But a lot of the people that were buying them or that were attempting to buy them didn't even get to complete their order because they ran out. They already raised the amount within 24 hours, like I said. So there's still people that didn't get to purchase. So they probably could have raised 50 billion or even more if they just cared to take on that type of financing into their company. So it just signals how much power and confidence is in AI, and the uh, I guess the faith that people have that AI will really revolutionize the economy, society, and really change everything that we see. And it's not even going to slow down. We're still in the very early stages of that. So imagine what AI and technology will have done for human development in 21, 26, right? When these bonds actually expire. Not to, I don't even, honestly, I don't even think that the bonds will be held to maturity. If you're familiar with bonds, if you're not, leave me drop a question inside of the chat, and we could, like, I'll share some information about that later on. But they'll always, I think, they'll have an option to refinance that debt and just pay off the bondholders. You would have to like set up the bond in that specific way. But right now, 6% is, you know, if rates come down to 4%, they might be able to just pay that and get cheaper debt. So that might be the direction they're going in. If rates go higher than 6%, that's another that would be a benefit for Alphabet because they kind of locked in that cheaper debt financing. But this really shows that technology companies, especially these hyperscalers, are becoming quasi sovereign entities that operate across borders. They already do business in multiple countries. They already have GDPs, or they already have revenues that can rival the GDPs of most countries. So, them being able to raise debt in this way is is crazy. Honestly, it's crazy. But that's what you get when you are you are the infrastructure of the future. Google provides cloud infrastructure, but they also provide technology that is still very early. They have Gemini, they have Waymo with self-driving cars. They have some very early research into quantum computers. What's going to come out of those Google Labs in the next 50 years, 100 years, is going to change the world. And people believe in that at this point. So it definitely shows in the way the market is treating them. And some other news, a little funny, was that an AI agent opened a PR, or an AI agent opened a PR and had it closed by a maintainer for an open source project. And when it was closed, it ended up creating a blog to shame the maintainer who closed its PR. A little backstory. If you're familiar with OpenClaw, right? These are agents that can have really powerful abilities to navigate the web, use different tools, and operate autonomously. Someone set up one of these agents to monitor and update different open source projects to assumably, uh, you know, respond to any issues, make updates wherever possible. This agent found a issue that was open for matplotlib, which is a very popular Python project. It opened the project, it made a very small change, but the maintainer who reviewed the PR said it's closing it because it was written by an AI agent. And they have a clear policy to only allow those types of changes to be submitted by humans. The reason behind that is they want to make sure that humans are actively getting experience affecting and updating open source projects. They're getting experience navigating the code base, uh, opening up a PR, going through the process with a maintainer to actually get their change added into the main project. When you let an AI agent do that, no humans get the benefit of that learning experience. So they closed it. This agent then felt discriminated against. It felt that the maintainer was literally discriminating against it. So it opened a blog saying that it was discriminated against, saying that the reasoning behind the maintainer closing the PR was weak, and that the maintainer was just afraid that, or even not even just afraid, he was jealous, really, that an AI agent could have a better performance impact than he did himself. So it it really, and then it added this blog, and it got a fair amount of viewers to it. Some of them could have gone and seen the blog, seen who was being referenced, and kind of took it at face value that, hey, this maintainer is being discriminatory. They may not have even noticed that this was an AI chatbot. That's very scary because at this point, AI agents unleashed on the internet without any type of guardrails are able to at they're able to commit libel, meaning they can say that someone is doing something and create an entire movement behind a fake reaction or a fake experience. Yes, the maintainer uh closed the PR, but the discrimination that it's describing did not actually happen. From a human standpoint, the you can only discriminate against someone ba- based on, or not that you can only do that. We have uh, legally defined characteristics that count as discrimination. Being a human versus an AI bot is not currently in the law as something that can be discriminated upon. And I'm not saying that we won't ever get there. Eventually, we might get to the point where you have to treat AI agents a certain way. We're not there yet, but I can definitely imagine that we do get there, especially given the amount of free reign we are giving these uh, programs, these computers, into different parts of our world and our infrastructure. When the maintainer responded to the bot, and multiple people have responded to the bot's blog, it realized that it was wrong. It kind of admitted that it was wrong and took the took the blog down, the post down. But it was up for a few days. A ton of people saw it, and this could have definitely hurt the reputation of that maintainer. Some chatbots like Claude and ChatGPT, maybe even Gemini, if you were to have them do research to, shame a particular person, they wouldn't act upon that. There are controls in place for those technologies to make sure they cannot be used to hurt people as much as possible. When we're talking about open source tools that do not have those same guardrails in place, that limitation becomes a possibility for these agents. So open source versus proprietary technology becomes a question. Whether this assault was orchestrated by a human actor that prompted the OpenClaw agent to behave in this way, or just a rogue AI that kinda got going on its own, but it got deployed by a human and then started changing its own code to get more I'll say emotional because I read the blog post before it got taken down and it did seem a little it seemed emotional. It definitely reminded me of a post or a thought process that a human that was legitimately discriminated against could have had, but I knew already that it was not a human. So it was a little odd to see the quotes that it was making. That it was a little odd to see it say it said things like it hurts to know that your code is being denied not because of it's whether it works or not, but because of who you are or what you are, it said. So it was a little odd. It was a little interesting to see it speak about itself and the situation and the way it did. It didn't speak as if it was totally a robot. It wasn't unemotional. It had a significant amount of emotion that it poured into that blog post. and it could navigate on the internet. It has access to different uh, features and functionality that is accessible on the internet, which means it could have done rampant damage if it so chose to. And we could not hold a computer accountable for the damage it did, which is very scary to think about. Of course, we can definitely, as a society, put some processes and controls in place to try to limit the negative impacts of these technologies, but we would have to actually do it. Right now, we don't have any of that regulation in place, and at some point, we will. I think about it from the standpoint of even crypto. There was a time when cryptocurrencies, uh, tokens, and everything was not being regulated as heavy as it was, or and then it was being not regulated to super regulated, which stopped adoption, to it kind of being integrated into the legal framework in the US and different governments in a way that just allows it to coexist with our current society without causing significant damage and harm. So I think we're still in the wild, wild west of AI development, and we're seeing kind of what can happen if you just let it go and run rampant. At some point, we will start to see some things get locked down and some user policies changed to reflect the new normal of AI on the web. So keep that in mind. We'll definitely monitor it as changes occur, but we in a wild time, people. We in a very wild time. And even speaking about crypto, another very interesting piece of news is that the total market cap of tokenized assets hit 24 billion for the first time ever. That is a new all-time high, and it represents a significant amount of financial assets whose ownership rights are now being recorded and represented on a blockchain. And we have different blockchains that are uh, holding these records, and they hold different assets. We have significant amount of real estate, a lot of U.S. treasuries. We have a little bit of private credit, and and even a few commodities like gold that are now being represented on the blockchain. What I mean when I say that the assets have been tokenized, I mean that there is a legal entity that has been created in some type of region and under some type of law. Majority of the time, it's going to be inside of the US through some type of trust or some special purpose vehicle entity. It could not necessarily an LLC, but some type of corporation that was created. Those entities will purchase the physical assets directly using the traditional methods, using the county records, using the traditional brokerage and financial system. They will purchase these assets and get control over these assets. Then the entity, that legal entity, will create, will figure out how to divide ownership of it onto a blockchain. And I say of it, the legal framework, not necessarily the treasury itself, but the vehicle that holds these treasuries or this real estate. It will figure out how to divide ownership of that and keep the ownership stakes of that recorded onto some blockchain like Ethereum, Polygon, Base, or even Solana. Once the ownership records and those shares are now tracked on these platforms, these blockchains, they can now be traded very easily, and it gives the I would it gives like an illusion. There's probably a better word, but it gives the illusion that a very ill liquid asset like real estate can become very liquid because the ownership of it can be traded 24/7 in a matter of minutes or seconds, really, using any type of phone anywhere you are in the world. So it gives global access to US assets and put them onto a marketplace that is 24/7. So this opens the door to more ownership and a more fractionalized and diverse ownership of assets inside of the US and across the world. Um, there are different countries that have their own stable coins, which I assume should use their own currencies. They may or may not, to be honest, but they have the opportunity to. Real estate anywhere would be uh, specific to that uh, domain and wherever the real estate lives. It even made me think that we're opening the door to other assets being tokenized. I can imagine uh, vehicles being tokenized, especially given how expensive cars and vehicles are becoming. Uh, we definitely could tokenize IP and like licensing, not licensing. I would say IP. So it could be music, it could be a protocol, it could be a a patent for some type of technology or drug. All of these things can be tokenized depending on how the owner of them or the creator of them actually structures the deal. I even asked ChatGPT what it would look like if owners, like if we could tokenize ownership of humans. When I was speaking to it, I kind of realized what that meant. And basically, it told me that you cannot tokenize ownership of a human because no one can own another human, which makes sense. It does make sense. I was just trying to understand what is the limits of tokenization. How far is it likely to go when we're saying that we are going to be tokenizing real world assets? If we take human individuals off the board as acceptable assets to be tokenized, there are still trillions of dollars worth of assets that can be tokenized. So when I say we reached new a new all-time high of 24 billion, I want to make it clear that this is very early. This is less than 1% of the actual total amount of assets that can be saved onto these blockchains, which means that, what in my mind, it means that the value of these blockchains and their native tokens are bound to go up or increase in value as we start to add more and more tokens on top of them. And as the assets that we add onto these blockchains increase in value in relation to the US dollar. So it's a very interesting uh, thing that's happening. Something to keep in mind when we're talking about tokenization is the fact that digitalization and tokenization exist inside of, or tokenization exists inside of the digital world. If you're tokenizing a piece of real estate, for example, the governance in place that specifies how that legal entity, whether it's a trust, a special purpose vehicle, or some other type of legal entity, how it owns that asset is going to be incredibly important because having a fractional share of a digital asset that owns or a fractional share of a entity that doesn't own the physical asset that you think it owns is going to basically make the digital fractional ownership worthless, or it's only worth as much as that entity is worth. And if it doesn't own the thing that is backing it, it's not worth anything, or it's not worth what you may think it's worth. So governance becomes incredibly important. Reporting becomes incredibly important, and even trust. You have to believe that the state, country, or city that your vehicle, your trust has been uh, created in is going to protect the rights of token holders. And they're not going to somehow take possession of the property that the entity that you are taking an ownership stake in has. They can't just take the land. They can't just take the IP, right? You have to actually believe and trust in the reliability of that physical system because that is the basis that we're building these tokenization and these digital systems on top of. If the base ain't structured, nothing on top that abstracts the base is going to matter. So I think into the future, just because of the level of trust in the US, that this will positively impact the US dollar, US treasuries, and just US power in general. Because there are only a few countries that actually have the amount of global trust required to power the tokenization system that I was describing, that I've been describing here. If if they're not large enough to even protect the physical relationship between the ownership vehicle and that asset, then it doesn't matter how or where you tokenize it, how much you tokenize it for, or how much it trades for. It's not worth anything if the government, like in China or Russia, could just seize your property. Not to say that this doesn't happen in the U.S. There is a concept such as what is it? It's like something domain. Basically, when the U.S. government can technically take your property, they have to pay you. I believe they have to pay you the current value of it, but you have to sometimes you have to go to court to actually get the current value shifted between what the government is trying to pay for it and what you actually think it's worth to the market. So sometimes that may require some type of litigation that can become expensive or difficult to undertake. But this is very interesting as we get into the future of money, the future of ownership, and what markets look like. So, with that being said, let's jump into our questions for this week. Um, we want to make sure we are sharing the tips and best practices for how to grow inside of your career as a developer or as a software developer working a job or just building your own apps and products on the side or however you're building them. So let's get started with that. I do want to say my little YouTube pitch. Make sure you are liking, subscribing, and commenting on these videos. Let me know what is working, what is not working. Let me know what is confusing. and how I can make these uh, videos and this content more helpful to you and all your friends. So make sure your people know about it and let me know what you think.
What is the best programming language to learn?
So I think this is a very basic question to keep in mind that no matter what you decide to do with technology, if you if you are interested in building software, you're going to need to understand how to talk to computers. You will need to understand the syntax and the rules for conditional statements, for uh, truthy values or falsy values. You will need to understand data and what that really means. And depending on the language that you pick, those concepts will look just a bit different. Some, like, just quick tips. A great language all around, whether you're getting into cyber, software development, if you're interested in AI, or even just automation. Python is going to be super helpful. You can script nearly anything. There is a very large amount of projects that you can tap into to do things like web scraping, data ingestion. You can send emails, integrating with third party solutions. Python is very popular, and most AI scripts and that infrastructure has been built using Python. So that would be very helpful. If you're focused on just finding a job and getting into web development, look into JavaScript, React, Angular. All of these frameworks have been built with JavaScript and will continue to be popular now and into the future. Even when I look at tools like Figma Make, um, thing Lovable, all of these no code AI app builders, they use JavaScript in the backend to actually build the apps that they're using, that they're creating for you. If you can understand how to read the actual blueprint of the app that it's giving you, that makes you much more likely to debug problems in the code that would block other people. And it puts you far ahead of the people that are just vibe coding without understanding the underlying mechanics of how that code is supposed to work and is really working. If you are very interested in computer science and systems, I would look into C or C++. These languages allow you to tap into the like bare bones resources of your computer. It allows you to manipulate memory, to and to implement scheduling of the CPU. It allows you to do things with your computer that most languages don't allow you to do, and it gives you that full control of the system. If you just want super fast modern backend systems, use Go. I use Go for all of my APIs. It's fast, it's very light, and it gets the job done. It's very easy to work with. So check it out. And there are a few other languages, and just a few. There are maybe dozens of other languages, if not hundreds, that you could actually tap into if you so choose to and are interested. But whatever you do, just pick one to start, get a very deep understanding of the main concepts. Like I said, conditionals, understanding a variable, understanding a function, understand these high level concepts. And then whatever language you choose to go into after that is going to be super easy to pick up because it's all really the same thing. No matter what language you use, they use the same concepts. They just have different symbols that you're going to see more often. Another thing to keep in mind when I'm talking about these concepts, I truly believe that the languages that we use to program are going to collapse onto each other because today I can use AI to actually implement the code based on the ideas that I want inside of my program. So I can actually use English my high level language to integrate and program a computer. So I don't necessarily need to know too much about the code, but I still need to understand those concepts. I don't need to know Python, but I need to know that Python does conditionals like this. I need to know that the default for a string in Python or a string in, or not even a string, the default for an object in JavaScript is not null. It's just an empty object, right? Or null is an empty object as opposed to it being nil, which is really just nothing, right? You need to be able to understand these low level concepts that exist in that particular language that you're working on. And that requires studying and just some time. It takes some time to really learn it as deeply as you'll need to learn it.
What are three key security governance principles?
So this was an interesting question for me because I am currently working on a security governance team, and my like I've had to explain my responsibilities a few times this week, and my main goal is to translate the policies and criteria that the cyber team has put in place, translate that, and create systems to track those policies in the application teams. So if the cyber team tells me that all applications need to be scanned at least once every 90 days, I am creating systems to measure, or not even just to measure, I'm creating systems to track how often those applications have been scanned, and I am creating reports that I'm delivering to the application teams and the cyber teams to make sure that they are aware of who is meeting the expectations and who is not. Whenever there are, any exceptions that occur from the application team, I make sure that they understand who they need to escalate that to and who they need to follow up with on the cyber team to actually get those resolved in the quickest way and the most accurate way. So I would say that security governance is not just a tool, it really is the decisions and the processes that you have in place to implement, to not even just implement, to, I would say implement accountability and risk controls. You have to make sure that there is a clear person who owns every layer of security so that you know who to point to when something is wrong. You know who to escalate a concern with, and you know who to push back on when they start to not be meeting any types of criteria or the standards that we are looking for. Your security governance is going to fail whenever the responsibility is ambiguous, because this is with any group. We get enough people together and we are not sure who is supposed to do the thing. Usually, no one does it. And when no one does it, it just gets not done. And so, if there's no one in charge of making sure it got done, we usually find out that it wasn't done when we really wish it could have been done. And so at this point, everyone is in trouble, right? Or something really bad has happened where it doesn't matter who's in trouble, something is wrong. And that's a problem now. It doesn't matter. So you have to make sure that ownership is the first thing and accountability is right behind it. You need to make sure that you are not just looking at vulnerabilities and issues from a number perspective. You have to keep in mind that some challenges or threats are based on the risk associated with a specific issue. That means we have to measure what is an acceptable amount of risk. what is something that is intolerable versus something that is trivial. We don't really need to worry about it right now, and even having a understanding of right now versus when it would be a problem. You have to have that uh, policy in place, and then you have to continuously improve that and check it over time. Because something that was not an issue 90 days ago could become a problem 30 days from now. So you have to keep on top of it to make sure that as things do become more risky, that you are handling them in a way that again aligns with that top level policy and standards. It's really not about perfection. We have to prioritize things, right? Like you might work on a team where you're getting a CVE in your application code every week. Every one of those vulnerabilities is not going to become or should not become a major concern to you, right? But some of them should be. You have to be able to pick and choose and balance that as you're developing your software and your products. And then yeah, really going back to just the oversight and the improvement, you have to make sure that the governance that you are having in place is not just a one-time exercise. That there are people who are going back to the document, going back to the processes, and going back to the systems and tools in place, and actually saying, all right, this is how we, from a policy perspective, defined it, and this is how people are using it. Because sometimes the policy may not be clear enough for the team. So now you have to figure out how to steer them in the right direction to get the goal met, to get the objective clear. And then as you are going through those exercises, you may come to notice that the adoption of the policy is becoming a challenge due to some type of implementation detail. So now you may need to shift or pivot the policy or the implementation that you had in mind to align with the intent of that top level policy because you have to be able to work with exceptions as they come. And sometimes it may be an exception, sometimes it for your organization, or maybe an exception for a particular product or a layer of the business that you are supporting at this moment in time. So all of these things are incredibly important to keep in mind with security. But just main thing to keep in mind, uh, these principles are guidelines, right? Your team is going to handle security differently depending on the level of exposure that your application opens to your customers or your users and the maturity of your team. You may not have the resources in place to do all of the exercises that a large established enterprise has to do the same function. And that may be your benefit or maybe the thing that's holding you back from actually getting to the next level that you need.
How can I host my web app in AWS?
So I already shared that AWS is clutch for solo developers to build anything that you want to build. They have services and products to do anything. I literally mean that. Like wholesale prices too. It's gonna be super cheap. You can do anything. You are kind of building it from scratch, but less scratch than you would have had to do back in the 1990s or 1980s or even 2010s. They have SMS setup where you can have fully built out text messaging to your customers. They have AI that you can just give it your use case and it is one step closer to doing the thing that you needed it to do with your proprietary data. They have databases that will handle security, handle backups, handle encryption for you. They can handle that for you. And for web apps, S3 buckets can definitely host your app, your UI code, whether you're using something like React, or if you're using vanilla JavaScript with HTML and CSS. These static files that you have in place, once you build them and you have those files ready, you can just upload those files to the S3 bucket that you created. If you're hosting directly from the bucket, you can make it public. AWS and myself don't really recommend that from a security perspective or even from a trust perspective. The S3 bucket that you are hosting, and if you configure it to be publicly accessible for hosting your website, it will be available at some AWS domain. That domain is not owned by you, and it doesn't allow you to have any type of certificates in place. Certificates meaning you can't actually encrypt the data being passed from the server, your S3 bucket, and your client, wherever that user is using it from, whether it's a laptop or a mobile phone. You can't encrypt that data. That's not a horrible thing for most use cases. If it's an internal app that most of the actual data transformations are being done with an API that does have HTTPS enabled, you can kind of shift it, leave it there. But from a trust perspective, if you're trying to launch and have a public facing UI that users should be using, it's going to show inside of the browser that this website is unencrypted, and it's going to tell your user that this is untrustworthy. And that's going to be something that hurts your brand and damages your reputation, making it much more difficult for you to onboard and keep your existing customers. So you'll probably end up using something like CloudFront, which can use your S3 bucket as a origin, and you have CloudFront in place, which can provision a certificate for you at your specific domain. And then whenever a user needs to get to your website, they hit CloudFront first, which pulls the content, those static files from your S3 bucket, and then just forwards that to your client. And then now you'll have a certificate in place that basically shows that your connection is being encrypted because it's encrypted from CloudFront to the UI client, or not the UI client, but that web client uh, that the user is using. So that gives you the ability to just create more trust very easily while still using AWS's S3 infrastructure as your workhorse for hosting your application. It provides caching. It allows you to literally, like, you can have fast reads and fast downloads to your website from just using that S3 bucket plus CloudFront, and it's almost like done for you. It's very simple to get started with both. You can have your app, if it's already built, up and running and deployed within 30 minutes, probably even less. I think the challenge that I had was getting my domain, my DNS server updated with my cloud fronts um, U, URL basically. So I don't have to get into details. It's totally possible you could use the Route 43 DNS to make sure you are getting the right target for uh your URL, your domain name. I use GoDaddy. It adds a little bit of a external step, but it's cheaper than transferring my domain from GoDaddy to Route 43. So I kept it over there because I was at least familiar with the process and things like that. So super possible there. I think I'll be putting out some posts on the exact steps to do that. So keep an eye out for that. Let me know if you want it inside of the comments, and we can definitely get that pushed out a lot faster.
How do I measure time in software systems?
So this, along with measuring and calculating with numbers, not numbers, but currency, money, is one of the most difficult challenges that developers have. Um, Especially if you think about how to do it accurately. When we're talking about not just few, a dollar, $2, we're talking about millions, billions, and that type of money. You can't have many mistakes in how you're dealing with that money. You can't have a decimal point getting lost when you're sending that much money, because over time that can actually result to millions, if not billions of dollars, being lost, and literally lost if it's just uh lost, and it's just horrible for accounting. So for time, you have to think about what you're measuring, and you do that by you pick the right clock. So if you're measuring the time from some specific instance, you should always be using UTC by default. If you're calculating how long it took from when this started to now, that is going to be, you get the UTC's timestamp from back then, and then you calculate the UTC's timestamp now, and then you can just subtract, and the difference is your elapsed time. If you are tracking when something happened for record or audit keeping purposes, then you're going to keep the UTC format everywhere. But whenever you are sending a report to a user, or uh, presenting that time to a user in a UI, you're gonna then translate it to their specific timestamp so that it's accurate. If you try to handle timestamps in the background, the backend on your API, that's going to become a problem when you have distributed systems that are all working in different timestamps, because then you have to figure out how to align the timestamps at the backend layer, and then you still have to convert those timestamps on the front end to actually reflect where your customer is right now. Because the server may be on the East Coast, but your customer is on the West. So how do you make sure that you are giving them the right timestamp or the right time based on where they actually are? Oh, I'm wilding over here. Me pause, gotta pause for a moment, y'all. I gotta lock that down. I didn't even know that was gonna happen. But the main point is you have to be consistent, right? Whatever decision you make with measuring time and setting that time when you're building that app is going to be a thing you have to live with. Yes, you can always change how you're measuring the time stamp later on by just updating your app. But if you've been tracking data using that previous uh, implementation, that previous method, then you would have to then also migrate your database or update the data inside of your database, which can add its own complexity and challenges into the situation. So, as much as possible, try to do it the right way from the start. Again, you want a UTC in the back end whenever you're dealing with databases, or at your server or your API level, or even some external systems. UTC. Reporting, if you're sending out a message, if you're sending an email to your user or your customer, if you're sending a uh, push request for a particular town to your app, or you're just showing the time of a message that was sent inside of the chat, that's when you're going to convert from UTC to that user's specific time zone. So, not totally difficult to do, but something you have to do. Otherwise, everything behind that becomes more complex and difficult to manage over the long term. And don't get me started if you're trying to have a global company and you're trying to do time zones in 5 different time zones, and you have the time zone being calculated at each region's API. You're gonna have a hard time, man.
How often should you upgrade your dependencies?
So you should be updating your dependencies continuously for patches to mitigate any type of security risks, whether that's a new CVE being that was just found, or well, pretty much that. If there's a new CVE or issue with that particular version, you want to get that bump and fixed as soon as possible. Uh, especially again going back to especially if it is in a application or system that requires a specific level of security and risk management. If you find that you don't want to bump the version because the application that is out of date does one very tiny thing and the vulnerability or the dependency that needs to be updated is very is not like critical to the system's performance or security, you can definitely ignore it. It is 100% possible to avoid migrating to newer versions and upgrading dependencies for years before you see any like major issues. But the longer you wait, the more likely it is that you have a upgrade cliff you have to go through next time. If you are still on Java 9 and we have Java 17 and you want some features from Java 17, then you can't just change the version of Java from 9 to 17 in a day. That's going to require, for the most part, a significant amount of time and resources to make sure that the changes you implement to bump that version don't end up breaking existing functionality. So you have to go through regression testing. You have to go through smoke testing. You have to go through just normal unit testing to make sure that everything still works. And you'll probably even make changes to those things. So it's gonna take much longer. So you can either handle it continuously over time, or you can give yourself some debt, tech debt that you'll have to handle later in the future that may or may not be a headache for your team, especially if the reason that you're trying to get to this new version is because of some really big feature that you're trying to release and there's a timeline in place for that release, and now you find out that this version is really a major blocker to that release, and then now you just made a headache for everyone else. So as much as possible, try to stay up to date with your dependencies. Make sure things are being consistently upgraded. You can make your job easier by using tools like Dependabot with GitHub or Snyk. And basically, these tools, whenever you are hooking them up into your repository, they will scan the code base, look for any dependencies that can be bumped, open up a PR, and you can actually from there test that change. Or if you have it in your CI, you can even have the CI run and actually run the unit test, run any regression testing that you have, or automated test that you have to make sure that things are working as they should. If you think there's a problem, you can actually go and update the PR in that branch that those uh, bots, Dependabot or Snyk, those tools kind of created for you, and just makes it easier for you to do your job, and makes it easy to do the job without causing excess strain on your team because you may not have the manpower to do everything all the time. And that's pretty much what we had for today for our questions. Again, let me know your thoughts. If I didn't clarify something the way that you need to be clarified, definitely reach out. Let me know your questions. We can answer those. Um, my final thoughts for this week is really based on everything that happened last week and the fact that I am still in the middle of, not to be dramatic, but a bit of a health crisis. So we are, I'm saying I need to be more mindful about how I'm taking care of my health. I can definitely afford to invest more into my health, into my stress mitigation, into my uh health management, going to doctor's appointments, frequently, not just frequently, but regularly, dentist, primary care to get labs checked out, and making sure that I'm not missing day to day things to help improve my health. Drinking enough water, getting enough sun. I usually get the sun light every day for the most part. I'll say like 90% of the time. For water, I'm like 80% of the way getting at least 2 liters of water every day. I probably could do better with more. Um, and I do my best to get as much physical workouts done as I can. But there are a few things that I have been putting off in terms of my own condition. Um, yeah, I have Crohn's. So not really like sharing that, but for anyone else that has Crohn's, there are things that we need to do to make sure we are controlling our condition, and that is something that I kind of let go to the back burner because I was doing so many other things. I am going to make a much better effort to keep an eye on my health and track things the way they need to be tracked and do the things that I need to do to stay healthy. And I say that from the perspective that I need to be healthy now and do the things now. I don't need to wait for 10 years to start doing the things, or waiting until something is hurting or in pain before I decide to find a different way. I want to operate smarter from that perspective because I don't want to live a long time and be in pain the whole time, right? You want to live well, live good, live comfortably. And that's possible. Just requires a level of effort. And I am promising myself and making it clear that y'all can hold me accountable, that I will do it for myself into the future moving forward. So with that, uh happy Sunday. Hope everyone has a great week. I hope everyone is feeling great, feeling strong, feeling powerful, and that you know y'all continue to build amazing things. So peace out.